Okay, 6 o'clock. Shall we make a start? It looks pretty bare and barren, but we'll go through the apologies first of all. I know from members who've rung me, Bromley Brooks has gone to a Christmas party. I'm sure Mark Wilson is also celebrating the birth of a grandchild today. So him and Janice are not coming. Janice is not very well, actually. Eric Acker is not well. Anthony Powell has got a wedding anniversary today and said if he came here, he would be in divorce proceedings. You never, you sad person. So with those, if we can... Oh, and Councillor Wilkinson has been to the hospital today for... Yeah, I won't tell you the details, but yeah, she won't be able to sit down. Right, okay then.
Rhiannon Birch, right?
Yeah.
Councillor Birch.
Councillor Birch. Yeah, I've already said Rhiannon. Yeah. I said the grandparents, didn't I? Oh, well. Yeah, okay. Are there any others? I can't see any missing. Thank you. Okay, I've got something that I want to remind everyone present that this meeting is being broadcast live via the internet and the record is archived for future viewing. So remember that you're live tonight. Right, okay then, moving swiftly on. I've got the minutes of the last meeting here. Can someone move them as a true record? Members happy for me to sign them off? Thank you. I will duly sign them now and then hand them to the committee clerk. Right, to receive declarations of interest on the Council's Code of Conduct, I'm going to be the first one to declare on 2015-01030. That's the Court Farm, Bombleston. And the nature of my interest is that I believe the landowner, Mr. Johns Powell, he kindly let me have a golf day for my charities, the Royal National Lifeboat and St Vincent de Paul, which I raised a substantial amount of money for them. But through his kindness, but I feel that I should declare that interest, so I'll vacate the chair. You can. Have we got a seconder? Are members happy for Jonathan Drysdale to take the chair? Yeah. 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 Members happy for Jonathan? That's the thing. Yeah. Okay. Yes. Yeah, because I think that there may be an application by somebody else in the room. Yes, Bob Penrose.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to declare interest, agenda item 13, 2015-01030, Court Farm, Bombleston. I'm personally known to the applicants, having been a very near neighbour for 7 years, so I will withdraw from the meeting.
Gosh, right. Thank you for that, Bob. And Andrew Parker.
Yeah, lastly, I'm the architect, so I'll withdraw as well.
We'll go out for a coffee.
And I don't think there's an interest because I've actually withdrawn it, but I'm also the architect for Keeper's Cottage, but I've withdrawn the application, so I presume I don't have to declare an interest.
Oh, no, not if it's not on the agenda now.
No, thank you.
Okay, then, we'll go out together. Vicky.
Thank you, Chair. I need to declare an interest on the agenda item number 12, the enforcement action at 42 Stanwell Road. I know the applicant, so I'll be leaving the room and Justina will present that one.
Okay. Yeah, Jonathan Drysdale. Okay. So I've just reminded the committee clerk that Jonathan will be taking the chair, so thanks for that. I will be bringing forward the application for Bryn Eithan to the very top of the agenda if members are all happy with that, because I know that the public are in the gallery and some members have got another meeting to go to. Is that fair? Okay. Excellent. Thank you. Right. Now we've done the declarations of interest, we're on to agenda item 4. These are 2 references that have been put before the Planning Committee from Policy Wales. I'm going to ask Vicky Robinson, our new Director of Planning, if she'll provide us, or the Operational Manager, one day Director. But there you go. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so agenda item 4, the reference from Cabinet is to do with Planning Policy Wales, Chapter 10, Retail Centre Development, and also a revised technical advice note 4 on Retail Centre Development. This is to do with Welsh Government consultation on these 2 documents, and the Cabinet report outlines the Council's response to the draft revisions to those policies. Safe to say there's nothing remarkable in those 2 documents. It's clarification on process and guidance to deal with retail centre development, and we've made a number of comments to do with those. So it's just for information for Planning Committee.
Okay. Members happy? Move to note? Okay then. Can we go on to the next reference then? The new draft supplementary planning guidance on affordable housing.
Thank you, Chair. There's actually 2 documents. It's the Affordable Housing SPG and the Planning Obligations SPG. These supplementary planning guidance have been prepared to assist us now going forward through the LDP inquiry. They are written in the context of the LDP policies. So they are in draft form at present, and they outline our new approach to dealing with affordable housing matters, which will change slightly to how we have been dealing with them under the UDP policies. In particular, things like looking at smaller sites for affordable housing down as low as 1 net gain in terms of dwelling types, which is a new LDP policy, and also dealing with commuted sums or off-site contributions for affordable housing on smaller developments, and this guidance sets out how the council will actually implement that policy. And then the obligations SPG is largely based on our existing obligations SPG. It's updated with inflationary increases and also is based on our new LDP policies. Both of these supplementary planning guidance documents, having been to Cabinet and now tonight at Planning Committee for information, will now be used as material considerations in development control purposes. That doesn't give them the same status as planning policies in the development plan, but it's fair to say they are relevant insofar as we are implementing some of the LDP proposals. You'll be familiar with some of the LDP housing allocations, for example, that have already come forward, been in advance of the development plan process. So it's relevant to use this guidance to support the council when we're looking at those types of application moving forward. Okay.
Okay. Andrew Parker.
Yeah, thank you. Vicky, have we got a date when this comes in? Is it January the 1st, or is it for the affordable housing? Do we know?
Turn your
oh, sorry.
As a material consideration, it will have immediate effect. So it's safe to say it does in some, because the evidence that supports the LDP is already being used as material considerations, as we've already discussed on other applications. Essentially, this is another step because it's another document which provides advice and support. But in answer to your question, it takes immediate effect from the Cabinet decision, and it's referred here for information for Planning Committee. Okay.
Happy, Andrew. Councillor Jonathan Bird.
Hi. Is this an all Wales thing, or is it an all UK thing, or is it specific to the Vale of Glamorgan? Could I inquire?
These 2 documents are specific to the Vale of Glamorgan. They're supplementary planning guidance based on our own local development plan policies.
Yeah.
I'm just a bit concerned that it'll stifle development and the economy in the Vale of Glamorgan. We've already in Wales got the new building regs coming into effect now, with putting probably £1,500 to £2,000 build cost on houses in Wales due to the fire regulations, and I'm just extremely worried that this being specific to the Vale of Glamorgan, we're going to suffer a little bit with economic growth.
Thank you. And Councillor Jeff James.
Thank you, Chairman. It's in regard to the actual report that is listed as agenda item 5, and not so much the supplementary, but it makes reference to obviously requiring this additional information, this additional report, to support providing evidence to the Welsh Government. So would it be appropriate to say that it'll be really for the Minister to decide whether or not he accepts this in support of the information that because they've asked for further information. Presumably this is the further information. Therefore, are we not going to be waiting for the Minister to say, or the Planning Inspectorate, whether they feel that we're justified in our plans?
Yeah, these documents have been prepared in support of the LDP. They are therefore the inspector in the first instance to consider whether or not to understand how we intend to implement our policy. So they support the policies drafted in the LDP. They need to be considered, and this just helps to evidence how the council intends to implement that. In terms of using them now as material considerations, we feel that we are justified in taking that approach. In respect of the planning obligations SPG, it is, as I said, it is largely the same as what our existing planning obligations SPG is based on our UDP policies. It's just inflationary increases, so it doesn't substantially change the game in terms of the planning obligations SPG. In terms of the affordable housing, it is more of a shift away from what we've been doing because, as I discussed, it is looking at smaller sites. But the evidence that supports that policy in the LDP in terms of our rural housing needs survey, our local housing market assessment, our affordable housing viability studies, all of those pieces of evidence individually do already act as material considerations and are legitimate material considerations. So this is just supporting them in practice to help developers or anyone else understand how actually that translates into practice when dealing with planning applications.
You have to put your mic on so the camera can pick you up.
So this is going to be, I mean, additional evidence to the inspector, but presumably he will be making recommendations on the LDP to the planning inspectorate and to us, I would think.
That's right. The inspector will obviously make his report, which will assess fundamentally whether or not our LDP is sound. He may or may not comment on the content of our individual supplementary planning guidance and things like that. If ultimately he felt that our policy on affordable housing was unsound, then clearly that would have implications for what we've suggested in the SPG, and we would need to revisit it. So I think the recommendation does here say that a further report on the proposed changes to the SPG is prepared after we've received the LDP inspector's report.
Thank you for that. Councillor John Drysdale.
Thank you, Chair. And just on Councillor Bird's concern, yeah, you don't want to kill the goose that lays the golden eggs, but as the existing situation, it's open for developers to say there are viability constraints here on this site, and therefore we can't meet Section 106 obligations. So to that extent, it doesn't change the situation.
Thank you. Councillor Andrew Parker.
Yes, picking up on Councillor Bird's point, if this is now being implemented for small-scale schemes, I myself can see a problem there. What would happen if the inspector decided not to support the 1s, 2 and 3? How would we go about unscrambling? Wouldn't it be better to have a moratorium until the LDP, which is only 4 or 5 months off probably being finalised, before we implement obviously the increased costs that this will put on small-scale developments?
Okay.
Obviously, officers have recommended that it does get implemented now with immediate effect. The evidence in terms of the affordable housing viability studies and the evidence on housing need demonstrate that we're justified in asking for this, which is why we're suggesting the sooner the better in terms of starting to deliver on this. In terms of planning committee's role, obviously this report is here for information, so it would be for you to propose that recommendation to Cabinet, I assume, if you wanted to make that suggestion.
Yeah. Jonathan?
I am going to make that proposal. I propose that we don't support this and we refer it back to council. No one supports affordable housing more than I do, and I firmly believe that we need to provide affordable housing, but not unilaterally. It should be done evenly over the whole of Wales. We've already got this problem, as I said, where houses are being built in England and the developers are looking in England more than they are in Wales. We've got the bridge costs. Why on earth are we tying our hands behind our back? I just feel that Cabinet need to rethink this, and I am making a recommendation that we refer it back to council with my concerns.
Okay. Have we got some sort of wording that we're going to use that you'd like?
My concerns are that it's a unilateral action.
Yeah.
My concerns are that it's a unilateral action, and it is going to be to the detriment of the Vale of Glamorgan. It will export building to other counties, possibly to other countries, i.e. England, and it will stifle development in the Vale of Glamorgan. So I urge them to rethink the policy.
Anybody else got any views that they'd like to add that if we're going to send this back to Cabinet?
Could I just say, I think it prejudices small-scale development. We're all very happy with the affordable housing on the large ones, but the one-off for the small builders and the self-build, I mean, I think this prejudices a lot of that. And picking up again on Councillor Bird's point, you know, they are going to start moving out of here because of the increased cost at the start of any development. So the prejudicial thing is the way I put it.
Yeah, come back, Vicky.
Sorry, I just wanted to respond to that point because I think I should make it clear, whilst these policies, these SPGs are unique to the Vale, the idea of it is not unique to the Vale, it's across the whole of Wales. Well, no, but that's what I wanted to clarify. I think maybe I wasn't clear. I can't tell you exactly what precisely affordable housing policies are in every other authority in Wales or in England, but it's safe to say all of them do have affordable housing policies. All of them do require a percentage of affordable housing to be provided on sites. The threshold at which that comes in is very much dependent on the local authority area and the evidence that informs their plan. So very often in rural authorities, I can't say for certain because I don't work in every other local authority, but certainly authorities like Powys and the rural authorities have for a long time used lower thresholds because they don't have major development schemes coming forward. We have suggested this on the basis of the evidence in the Vale of Glamorgan in terms of what the viability evidence demonstrates and what the housing need is, and that's why we are where we are. That's why our LDP policies say what they say, and we don't think that it will undermine viability in the Vale of Glamorgan, which you can see all the time. Houses are being built in the Vale of Glamorgan. You can see from our planning agenda the demand, and yeah, it is something we need to keep an eye on. But all I'm saying is at officer level, we're confident with what is being proposed.
Can I take Councillor Gwyn Roberts and then I'll come back to you, Jonathan?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. In respect of how this affects just the Vale, the fact is, am I right in saying that the Vale is probably the most buoyant housing market in Wales? I understand that to be the case. So in which case, what this will do is if it has an effect, it will tend to balance up the housing demand. Now, within this planning committee, we have all sorts of criticisms that there's too much development right across the Vale. If it slows it down a little bit, that may not be a bad thing. What we do know is there's a severe housing shortage because of house prices here. So if it actually sort of increases, we have a need for affordable housing. We have a better housing market than the rest of Wales. So if it actually has a slightly detrimental effect on the housing here, then surely that's not a bad thing for us.
Councillor Jonathan Bird.
When you don't seem to be getting the gist of it, if we slow down and don't build so many houses, we don't get so many affordable housing units. That is the crux of it all. If we get less housing built in the Vale of Glamorgan, that means less affordable housing units. I would like to see, for me to be more confident with this, evidence of what other local authorities are doing as far as thresholds below 4 before I could take back my recommendation, really. I would like to see this go back to Cabinet. If they wanted to come back to us to okay it, give us the evidence that this isn't going to be detrimental. The fire regulations are only just coming in now, so we haven't seen that effect as yet. I know from talking to property developers, they are looking the other side of the water because of that. It is making land unviable in Wales in the future when you're comparing it to England, when they've got a £2,000 less build cost to start with. So at the moment I am fairly strong on this. I really think Cabinet need to do more work on this and give us a little bit more evidence for me to be comfortable with it.
Okay. Gwyn, you wanted to come back. I'll come out to you, Nick. I've got Jonathan Drysdale next and then come to you.
Thank you, Chair. Just in terms of what Councillor Bird's comment, I do understand the process, and it's a question of elasticity of demand. The number of houses being developed could go down, but in terms of the proportion of affordable housing, it would have to go down a drastic amount then to reduce the housing. It is a question of balance, as the officer explained, but the indications are that this authority, better than any other in Wales, can sustain that level. And so I think in that respect it's a sensible solution.
Okay. John Drysdale.
Yeah, I don't dismiss the concern about the impact on development, but I'm far more concerned about the sprinklers impact than about this, because what we took really the crunch of this, the hub of it, is that we're looking at extending the requirement for affordable housing down to a smaller number of houses in a development. Now, at the moment, they don't have to provide any affordable housing. So if we apply this and the development didn't go ahead, we'd only be in the same position as if we didn't extend it down. We would still have no affordable housing. So to that extent, it's a win-win situation for us. But yes, it would need to have an eye kept on it to see that it didn't have an adverse impact. And this is something we review regularly anyway. To that extent, I think the question about evidence, well, like many questions in planning, it's do you believe the officers or not? Do you believe the engineers? Do you believe the professionals who've done the housing assessments or not? Well, I mean, Vicky has talked about the evidence in the documents, and those documents are before us. So we do have some evidence before us that this can be supported as a change.
Okay. Councillor Nick Hodges.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm a bit confused with the way this is going. An LDP, and this is supplementary planning guidance to add to the additional evidence for the examiners, I suspect, is really a way of tailoring the market and building and house building to the way we most would like it, I suspect, in the Vale of Glamorgan. At least that's the way I always hope it is. But my confusion is here is about procedure. This was a Cabinet on the 14th, which was, what, 3 days ago. And in the recommendations, it's there that it's referred to us for information, which is how it's here now. Now, we've got the information. The question is, do we accept the information, believe the information, like the information, or whatever? Now, to me, if people are unhappy with this, surely that's the perfect thing for a call-in, which would actually, I understand, stop the procedure dead until it's resolved one way or another through scrutiny. Here, by referring it to us for information, which they have, and quite rightly so, if we say we're not happy with it and refer it back, I don't think that stops the procedure exactly. That just says that we're unhappy with it or want some more information, which can probably be just referred on to us for our next meeting. So I would be more inclined to support or refer back if I knew it was going to be backed up with a call-in. That's all I'm going to say.
I'm happy to do that, and happy that it is a way. I hadn't thought of the call-in way, actually, Nick. And yeah, absolutely. No, I thank you for that. But What I am asking for is the referral back for more information as to what other local authorities do before we, I know it's only for noting, but before we give this planning committees.
It's before us for consultation.
Yeah, there's no point it coming here if it's just for noting, and we're not going to debate it because we wouldn't be doing anything now. So yes, I will request a calling on it. And I am asking, I'm not saying stop it, I'm not saying no. I'm saying give me more information so I can make a proper decision on it. Because I am very concerned about exporting. We're just getting the road to recovery back on track. The Vale of Glamorgan needs industry, it needs building, it needs everything else to keep going. I know we don't want to see it because the infrastructure is not there. But unfortunately, unless we get the Vale of Glamorgan's economic return, we're not going to have a prosperous Vale of Glamorgan. And the last thing I want to see is us exporting that to Bridgend, to Swansea, to other places that have got a much lower threshold, a much higher threshold. So I'm asking for the evidence just to back me up and give me some security.
Yeah, Vicky.
Sorry, I just wanted to clarify the point. Can you, in doing a resolution, can you confirm to me whether or not you are concerned about the SPG, both SPGs, firstly, and whether you are concerned in terms of the it being used now as a material planning consideration or being used to support the LDP as a guidance document? Because obviously the LDP policies in terms of the thresholds are already adopted and endorsed by the council and have been submitted to the Welsh Government on that basis. So it is important that we have an SPG document to back up that policy moving forward as part of the inquiry. If the concern is more about the short term using it now as a material consideration, then I'd be grateful if that was clarified in your resolution. That's what I'm asking.
I'm concerned about both, actually. I'm concerned about the using it immediately. And you know, if we are going to run with it and recommend it, I think it should be delayed until the inspector has seen it and said yes, he's happy with it. So, you know, I've got concerns over it. I will ask for a proper debate to be had in scrutiny on it, but I'm asking for more information to come back specifically on the threshold below 4 on that and evidence of what other councils in Wales do. If we could just have a little table of what other councils in Wales are doing, and it would just give me a little bit more reassurance that we're not going out on our own and cutting our own throats. It's not a lot to ask. It's a delay of a month, I know, but after all, I'm asking you to delay using it for 12 months or more until the inspector has been through it as well. So that's what I'm requesting, and that's what I would request scrutiny look at as well.
So, are we sending it back to Cabinet, or are you going to do a call-in? Both. Members happy with that? We send it back with those reservations that Jonathan's outlined? Yeah.
Chair, I mean, just looking at the...
Is the debate reopened now? I thought you would ask for in effect a vote. No. Are we continuing the discussion?
Well, we've got to clarify whether we're actually sending it back. It seems that people are happy to send it back.
With respect, Chair, it's blatantly obvious what's happening. And there seems to be a fear to come to a decision. Councillor Bird has made a proposal, and I think really you should now put it to the meeting. You know, this is going on a bit too much.
Well, we'll hear from what John Drysdale's got to say, and I'll conclude it. Okay.
With respect to Councillor Frank's concerns, it is about procedure that I wanted to speak, because we've actually got 5 recommendations before us with different aspects of this. I think one of the problems with what Councillor Bird has said about, well, can we let the inspector decide whether this SPG is okay or not before we implement it? Well, there's 2 aspects to that. The inspector can't consider this unless the council approves it to go forward to the inspector. So to that extent, it can't be left to the inspector. It has to be decided by the council and sent, and then the inspector can consider it. It isn't a separate, standalone piece of evidence and support. It is actually interconnected with other things. So I think, you know, personally, I would prefer to endorse the proposals, which is what recommendation 2 says, and that would have to go to a vote here. Obviously, Jonathan can call it in, and that will hold it up. I understand that perfectly, and that's exactly what I'm saying. It would need to go to a vote, but let's be clear what we're voting on.
Okay then. So have you got what you're saying, Jonathan? What you want to put to the floor? I've heard what Jonathan Bird. Right. Okay then. Those in favour of Councillor Bird's proposition, please show. Okay. Those against? Yeah, it's clearly carried. So it's going back, and you're going to have a call in. Okay, then, fine. Thanks for that. I didn't expect we to have a debate on references. But, right, we've got the report of the meeting. This is agenda item 6. This is the Planning Subcommittee Public Rights Away, which was held on the 18th of November, which I chaired, and some of the members around the room are present. Shall we move that we note that report? Yeah, Councillor Penrose.
Thank you. I did see correspondence after the meeting from the lady that spoke at the meeting,
yes,
questioning the accuracy of the minutes. Has that been resolved?
Well, she can question the accuracy of the minutes, but it's for us as councillors.
No, that's fine.
Yeah, we'll have those minutes.
And we are satisfied that those things.
And we'll move them, or we'll argue about them at that point. So members happy with the we note. Okay, fabulous. Agenda item 7 is site inspections, which is a report of the managing director. Anything to add, Victoria? Right, move we note. Members happy? Excellent. Agenda item 8 is the building regulation applications and control matters determined by the director and his delegated powers. Anything to add, Victoria? Move we note. Yes.
We usually put these things through on the nod, but on page 4, and this is on building regs, yes, for information of members in following initial notices have been received.
Yeah.
And if you look towards the top of page 4, there is St Cyrus Lower Comprehensive Dinas Powys, 280 new build residential. Now, Victoria has kindly tried to explain to me how come we've got all these houses when we haven't ostensibly sold the house, and we ostensibly haven't got a
planning application.
Haven't got a planning application.
Yeah.
And I'm just voicing my concern at seeing these, which I think I've received the proper reassurances. But could it be articulated publicly what this means?
Yes, for the more senior people on the planning committee who understand these things, I'll ask Victoria to explain to the more junior members.
Thank you. I'd like to put the stuff on Facebook, perhaps.
No,
Chair.
I wouldn't if I were you.
Right.
I'll get you into trouble. Victoria.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to confirm, as the report says, this is for members' information, just that these initial notices have been received. These are notices served on us by approved inspectors to let us know that it's an approved inspector that intends to carry out the building regulations approval rather than our own building control department. It doesn't grant or convey any consent from the council for these dwellings. It doesn't mean that they've got planning permission or anything else. It's just them serving notice saying that they intend to use an approved inspector to do their building control. The reason that it's come in so far in advance is because many developers at this stage are alert to the new sprinkler system coming in, and if they get their notices in now, they've got 12 months in which to commence development before the sprinkler system kicks in. So it's not uncommon at the moment that we're receiving these kind of notifications.
Is it? Thank you very much. Okay. So we got up to agenda item 8. Are members happy we move? We note that report. Okay, 9 is planning applications determined by the director under his delegated powers. Anything to add, Victoria? Nothing to add. Move we note. Thank you. Agenda item 10, which is always a topic of conversation in this committee, and that's to do with appeals. But I know that we've got the right officer with us tonight, Justina Moss, our Principal Appeals and Enforcement Officer. Over to you, Justina.
Thank you, Chair. Page 14 identifies the planning appeals that have been received since the last committee. Of note is the second item on the list, which is the appeal in respect of the residential development site at St Nicholas. That's one of the items on the agenda tonight with a stance report. That's an application, an appeal for non-determination. Briefly running through the appeal decisions that we've had since last committee, and there are quite a few. Page 15, there is, this was an appeal against a high hedge complaint, a decision that we had made in respect of a high hedge complaint, and that is dealt with under the separate legislation to the planning legislation. The council decided not to serve a remedial notice on this site, and the complainant appealed that decision, but the inspector agreed with all the conclusions that we came to in terms of the impact that the hedge had on overshadowing and on the appellant's reasonable enjoyment of the property, and he came to the same conclusion that a remedial notice wasn't warranted at that site. Page 16 is a straightforward planning appeal against a new domestic dwelling in a green wedge site. Again, the inspector agreed with our decision in terms of the harm to the green wedge, and that it hadn't been demonstrated that there were special circumstances that would outweigh that harm. He also agreed with the council's conclusions with regard to the impact on the rural character and appearance of the site. Next page is a agricultural building that was proposed. The inspector wasn't satisfied that the appellant had provided a business case for the development, and he had submitted insufficient information to justify the size and design of the building. He said the building looked domestic in its appearance, and in view of the insufficient agricultural need, and this caused unnecessary harm to the character and appearance of the area. The next, page 18, is a appeal in respect of a barn conversion. The building was a relatively modern flat roof workshop type building, albeit in a rural location. The building wasn't of any particular merit, and the inspector agreed with the council in that these types of buildings aren't appropriate for conversion, in that our policies seek to retain and convert our traditional type barns and stone buildings that can't currently be used for agriculture. And this was a modern building, not really the type of building that the policy is aimed at. So he found that the building would not comply with the barn conversion policy in that respect. The inspector didn't agree with the line that we were taking with this site, in that they were proposing a structure inside the building. We came to the conclusion that it would represent a new dwelling in the countryside. He didn't agree with us. He still considered that the building should be considered under the barn conversions policy, but he agreed with our conclusions that the building wasn't capable of conversion because it required this internal structure to accommodate the new dwelling and the new use. So that the inspector there agreed with most of the council's concerns with regard to that scheme and dismissed the appeal. Page 19 is a conversion of a ground floor shop to residential use. This is a disappointing decision because it's one where the council refused permission because they provided no amenity space to serve the occupiers of this dwelling, but the inspector considered that to not be of significant enough harm to warrant the refusal of the application. She concluded that the site was a short distance from the main shopping centre, which, in my view, I think that that doesn't really address residential amenity needs of the occupiers. And she also concluded that the site was in a predominantly residential area where there were tightly grouped terrace properties, but those terrace properties have their own amenity space, albeit they're particularly small. She basically concluded that the harm to the residential living conditions arising from no outdoor amenity space would be minor, and so determined that the scheme was appropriate. The next appeal decision on page 20 is in respect of the redevelopment of the Dolphin Public House site on Barry Island. This was a fairly complex appeal in that the principle of the development was considered by the council to be acceptable, but we resolved to grant permission with what we've referred to in the appeal as a clawback 106 agreement. So the vitality of the scheme was in question. We were of the view that viability of the scheme. We were of the view that the viability could improve in view of the regeneration works on Barry Island, and in those circumstances we should receive some 106 contributions to be paid at a point when viability would improve if that were to occur. The inspector, despite our detailed submissions in this appeal and a very long hearing, the inspector was not satisfied that we had provided sufficient evidence to demonstrate that the viability of the scheme would improve. And in that circumstance, he concluded that the clawback mechanism, Section 106 agreement that was proposed, wasn't appropriate. However, in the light of the potential improvement of viability, he granted a 2-year planning permission. So this development has to be commenced within 2 years as opposed to the normal 5 years. And then the final decision is in respect of an enforcement appeal, whereby we served an enforcement notice in respect of the use of an agricultural building and land as effectively a builder's yard with a residential caravan on the site. The inspector, in respect of all matters, the inspector agreed with our case that the builder's storage and builder's yard use of the site was occurring. He was satisfied with the evidence that we gave, or your officers gave. There were slight changes to the enforcement notice, but those were agreed by the council, and then the appeal was dismissed and the notice upheld with amendments. And that's the final decision on the list. And you'll note then on page 24 that we maintain a very high level of success with our appeals. 86% in the planning appeals, 75% for enforcement appeals, with a total of 84% of appeals where the inspector has agreed with our conclusions in respect of enforcement and planning decisions.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Marcus normally moves to note, doesn't he? But anyhow, Clive.
Question, if I may. I say it's a question. I see the rationale of having appeals in the planning system, but it's my experience after reading a lot of these inspectors' reports, etc., that quite often it's down to an opinion. Now, I don't think that's strong enough, Mr. Chairman, there, to justify the appeal. Now, the other thing my main question was, are we singing from the same hymn sheet? Because the reason I say that is, I went for an application and you said to me, I have to have 3 planning spaces, and I say I can only get 2, and yet when the inspector looks at it, my thoughts were that they said, well, 2 was adequate. Now, if we're singing from the same hymn sheet, Mr. Chairman, we're disadvantaged. That's the point I was trying to make. So I don't know if you have any views on that. But that, we've got professional officers here. They know this because they're doing it 24 hours a day. And you're looking at that scheme. Now, when you said that there wasn't enough amenity space on that site, I mean, I would, we can't challenge that. That's the tragedy. Once that lady has made that opinion there, there's no one else to go higher, Mr. Chairman. Okay. Anyway, thank you.
Nothing to add, have you, Justina? Can you put
on the amenity space issue, whilst that decision is disappointing, it is an isolated decision, and we do have other decisions in not in a city, but in our towns, where no amenity space or no access, direct access to amenity space has been proposed, and those appeals have been dismissed, and the inspector has agreed with our policy and our supplementary planning guidance. They always say that the standards imposed by the supplementary planning guidance are flexible. They're not intended to be prescriptive, but we have other decisions that would counteract that decision. It's an isolated decision. It's disappointing, but it is an isolated decision, and it is, at the end of the day, only one inspector's decision, and the majority of decisions that we have in this type of case would support our policy and our SPG.
Thank you. Councillor Nick Hodges.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I just say excellent results, first of all. I know you not love your appeals, but it's what you do. I know that.
She's a tough cookie.
Yes, yes, indeed, and we're lucky to have her. On the dolphin, that was always going to be a chuck it up in the air and see which way it lands with an inspector one, I thought. But I thought the case myself was strong. I'm interested in the time limit, though, of the building allowance time.
2 years.
Yeah, 2, and I'm pleased with that. I note that they tried for longer, because there is a history, of course, of getting planning permissions and not getting on with the Act, or not signing 106s or whatever, which is where we're here now with this one. My general thought really was that I'll say it for the record. I don't believe they're going to build it anyway, but that's by the by. But can I actually have an idea, perhaps, with the examination and the actual hearing and everything? Was there any attempt at costs against us or anything like that? Or there shouldn't be, I know, but.
They didn't apply for costs. We did apply for costs because we felt that their appeal case was actually very weak, and we thought that we had a very strong case and that the Welsh Government guidance on these matters is very clear. Unfortunately, we weren't successful in that.
Okay, Councillor Andrew Parker.
Yeah, it's only just a quick one. Obviously, it's a 2-year timescale. Is there a process of renewing it, or it just falls after 2 years, I assume, if they don't discharge all the conditions and make a start?
You have to apply again.
Yeah, that's correct. It would, like any other permission, they need to implement it within 2 years, otherwise they would need to reapply.
Okay, members happy? We've debated the appeals. Thank you, Justina, for that report. It's a good percentage of wins for the council? Yeah, so we've done appeals. We're on agenda item 11 now, which is trees, which is the little I delegated list on page 25. Move we note trees? Nothing to add? There we are, nothing to add, so we've noted them. Thank you for that. Then we move on to agenda item 13, which is the planning applications. 12? Enforcement action. Ah, right. This is another one for Justina then. This is land and buildings at 42 Stanwell Road on page 26. Justina.
Thank you, Chair. This was an application, it started as an application for planning permission for the development, and it was for the retention of the development as built. I'm just wondering if you can actually see the photographs on the overhead projector there, but the dormer extension is just visible above the roof line there. It's a flat roof dormer extension, and as you can see from the plans on page 27, it extends the main roof line, rear roof slope of the dwelling, and it extends the annex roof slope. It's in a conservation area, that's why it needs consent, but also there are other factors that would also make it not permitted development. As I mentioned, a retrospective application was submitted for retention of the dormer. That was refused. An appeal was made against that decision, and that appeal was dismissed. So now we're seeking authorisation to serve an enforcement notice to remove the development. Members will note on page 31 and 32, we're seeking an unusual resolution here, which is the notice obviously has to contain reasons for serving the notice. There is the main reason for serving the notice, which draws on both the inspectors and the council's concerns with regard to the impact of this development on the host property, on the area and on the conservation area. But there is a second reason for refusal, which is an indication to the owner of the property and the recipient of the notice that if an application were submitted that would effectively reduce the size of the dormer, and by doing so we're referring to, and I've got the again, it's a fairly small scale plan, so you may not be able to make it out, but it's the element of the dormer at the top of the plan there. That, I think, creates the 6th bedroom. If that element were removed, then an application may be considered more favourably, and the government guidance advises us to do that through the notice. So whilst the notice requires complete removal of the dormer, both elements, as the entirety of the scheme is unauthorised, we do give an indication that a reduced size development may be considered acceptable.
Okay. Jonathan Drysdale, then I've got Gwyn Roberts and any other member. Start with you, Jonathan.
It's a shame that the lawyer has left us, but
yeah.
I mean, I've got no problem with the recommendation. I'm happy to move it. I'm just a little bit surprised if Welsh Government guidance actually says, please give an indication of whether an amended planning application is likely to be approved, because we are told as councillors to say no such thing in our discussions with applicants or community members and objectors. So I'm slightly surprised, but the lawyer's gone. So
you can maybe answer that, Justina.
The specific guidance on enforcement that's in Technical Advice Note 9 does require you to go through a process with the perpetrators to assist them along the process. So it's not to, you know, serve a notice and have no contact with them whatsoever. We are asked to assist them through the process and indicate that if a scheme can be made appropriate, how that should be done or how that can be done. we're not making any promises here that an alternative scheme will be approved, because of course that has to be considered on its own merits. But it's just an indication to say that some development may be appropriate, and we're letting you know that through this formal process.
Does that answer the question? The legal officer is here now.
I think that process of indication and encouragement to provide an approvable scheme is right and proper. I think putting it into the planning committee minutes is kind of slightly different, which is what I was a bit concerned about. But if you're happy with it and Welsh Government are happy with it...
No, it's fine. I did see another hand up, a little hand over here.
Thank you, Chair. Just a very brief comment, that's all. The photographs there of the extension didn't really do justice to how dominant it is to the street scene. It's you need to look carefully to see it there.
Yeah.
In actual fact, from Grove Place, it's very clear in the conservation area, the shape and materials, all the rest of it, totally inappropriate. So I just wanted some members to be aware of that.
Right, okay. Councillor Jeff James.
Yeah, Chairman, I think we've had a pretty full explanation of this, and I'm looking at page 31, paragraph 24, and it makes clear there the development subject to this report is considered to cause unacceptable harm for the reasons set out above. And so on that basis, I like to move the officer's recommendation.
And we've got 2 seconders, so I'll put it straight to the vote then, because I'll read the recommendation so it's quite clear that the Head of Legal Services be authorised to serve an enforcement notice under Section 172 of the Town and Country Planning Act 1990 as amended to require 1. The removal of the dormer extension from the rear roof slopes of the property, the reinstatement of the roof planes on both the main roof and the rear annex to the profile prior to the construction of the unauthorised dormer extensions. 2. In the event of non-compliance with this notice, authorisation is also sought to take such legal proceedings as may be required. Been moved and seconded. Members in favour? There we are. That is unanimous. Thank you for that. We'll fetch the officer back in.
Question, Chair, while bringing the officer back in.
Yeah.
How many days have they got to comply before we take
Serve the
action?
notice.
We haven't specified any time in the report. We are in discussions with them. We understand that money is tight with them at the moment. I think they've spent a lot of money on this development despite not having planning permission for it. And it will cost them a lot to go through the planning process to seek an amendment to the scheme and to obviously carry out the work. So the action won't put them out of a home, so we don't have to, you know, we don't think that their human rights are being affected in that respect. But I think we should give them a reasonable period in the light of the fact that they may have to go through the planning process to obtain permission for an alternative scheme.
Have they ever said to you, Justina, why they built a monstrosity without planning permission?
Without going into the details, I understand that they have extended family, number of children, and they have another child on the way, and they needed the extra room to accommodate their growing family, and that those personal reasons are they're referred to in the report. But as I conclude at paragraph 24, we don't feel that they outweigh the harm that's being caused.
No. It's cheaper to move out.
Can I just congratulate the Vale on this, because there was a culture in Penarth amongst some very well-known builders to just build, don't worry about planning, build, and then go for retrospective. And we've got some terrible, terrible places. It's too late to go back now because they've been there too long. But so I congratulate us, you know, in doing this. A lot of people have said, how the hell has this ever happened? So I can be able to go back to them now with their head held high. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you, Justina, for the report. On to the planning applications that are before us. If I bring Brynaithen home for the elderly at St Andrews Road, Dinas on page 202 for the first part of the agenda, and ask Victoria to deliver us that report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Can I firstly draw members' attention to the late representations? We have received late representations on this one from the head teacher of St Andrews Primary School, which adjoins the site. In response to those comments and concerns, officers are suggesting some changes to the conditions, specifically condition 7, which requires a scheme for traffic calming at the school access. In particular, we've added the section paying particular regard to the safety of pedestrians and cyclists accessing the adjoining school site, just to hammer home the point that we're expecting the traffic calming there to deal with the safety aspect adjoining the school. Condition number 14, which deals with the requirement for a construction environmental management plan. And again, another additional sentence in there that says the CEMP will include details of means of enclosure of the site during construction to ensure adequate measures are in place to protect the safety of children in the adjoining school site, which we may have expected that to have been anyway, but it's just emphasising the point that that's an expectation in that CEMP. Finally, an additional condition is recommended at number 17 to do with a requirement for a construction traffic management plan, which specifically avoids heavy goods vehicles or delivery vehicles coming to and from the site during school times, when parents are dropping off and collecting their children, so specifically between 8:25 and 9:20 and 15:10 and 16:05, Monday to Friday during the school terms, just to, again, deal with those issues to do with traffic impact. Sorry, Chair, do you want to take a question?
She hasn't finished it, but do you want to speak?
No, I was just going to ask, going to the email, there was the alteration and the addition.
Yeah, by all means. Okay, so just to briefly explain what the proposal is. The site, as Chair has mentioned, was the former Brynaithen Home for the Elderly. The site has now been cleared and has been disposed of by the council as land that we previously owned. The proposal is now for 18 residential units, which are described as older persons accommodation, being for people aged over 50. The proposal is for a rather contemporary design shown on the plans in front of you. The site rises, the levels rise quite steeply from the road frontage and are accessed via a tree-lined avenue from St I think it's St Andrews Road at the front. The proposal, as I've said, is a contemporary design, 2 stories on the one side, 3-storey flat roofed on the other side, and there is a communal building at the back which is going to be used for residents, events and activities, and also for visitors to stay there when they're visiting people living in the houses. Obviously we had a site visit today where we had an appraisal of the site and considered the issues. They are detailed in the report, and officers are satisfied that conditions can deal with any of the concerns that have been raised by the neighbouring properties, including the school.
Okay, I think the local members might want to say something. Can you just tell us how you enforce this over 50s? How do you stop somebody? And it might be because they're not paying any 106 contribution. So if a family of 4 moved in with a couple of children, how do we go back to the developer and say, hey up, we want some money off you towards education?
In planning terms, we haven't felt it's necessary to control the age of the occupiers. There's a number of reasons for that. Firstly, in planning terms, there's no reason why this site can't deliver normal open market housing. It's within the settlement boundary and so on. So in principle, normal market housing would be acceptable. The reason it's come forward as an older person's accommodation is because when the council disposed of the land, that was a restriction put on the land. So there's a covenant which is being controlled separately outside the planning system. So we're satisfied that we don't need to control it through the planning system, because it is being covered through through the land
Yeah.
sale transaction. So that's why we've come to those
Yeah,
conclusions.
it's not in the report. That's why we.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thanks for that. That's put our minds at rest. But I'll ask the local members. Councillor Franks.
Thank you, Chair. You have indeed raised a very valid point. 50 is a very low bar in my view, and it's more than conceivable that someone 50 would have, as you say, quite a few young children. It's not inconceivable. No, sorry. So, and I must say, we locally had been led to believe that there was going to be a bit more of social care in this site, but I think that's water under the bridge now. So, turning to the report, I'm grateful for the firming up of conditions regarding traffic and the management plan and indeed access. Because I must say, bear in mind the conditions of the site, and those people who know it will know it's a unique site in many respects. Being so close to the school, it really does cry out for a lot more detail, and I think more detail has been added. But I think we could have expected more detail again tonight. I'm concerned that on the face of it, we're going to be faced with a private drive serving this development. Now, that is most unusual that you have 17, 18 dwellings served by a private access. So that is curious that we're having that. I am also concerned to have more detail regarding off-site social housing, if you accept the concept of the development, and I appreciate it will be quite expensive, but the report is silent where this additional housing will go. Now, in Dennis Powers, we do need a whole mix of housing, and I would feel far more comfortable if we were told, yes, there will be somewhere in the local community just to fit the bill. Notwithstanding the comments about traffic calming and the like, I still remain very concerned how we're going to have all these vehicles crossing the route of hundreds of children every day, and I would have felt, and I think the parents would have felt, far more comfortable had a detailed plan been provided. We have the plan, the layout here. We have the layout of the housing, but the traffic management plan is absent. I'm sure everyone has seen the excellent letter from the school, and you've had an opportunity to read it. And there are very deep, genuine concerns about the situation. I think Victoria mentioned the enclosure of the site with the additions, but this is very important. At the moment, there's hardly a boundary line, so we will expect to have far more details, and we would have expected tonight to have those details, but sadly not to be. I'm also concerned that we don't have the safe working plan or details like that. You've got anything to do with building immediately attracts children, and these sites are substantial undertakings with enormous plant, and we urgently need an indication of this, the areas that will be zoned off where construction will not be allowed in terms of plant and the like. So Chair, I to go back to your point about contributions, I also think there should be contributions for education. It's ironic that the neighbour is a school, and that school will not benefit from the Section 106 procedure, which I think is a huge weakness. So, notwithstanding the strengthening of the conditions, I'm not convinced that this plan at this stage, in this form, is acceptable, and I will move disapproval.
I'll second that.
Yeah. I've got a local member here who wishes to speak, and I should have actually taken him before you, Councillor Franks, but... no offence taken, Chair. Thank you. So if I ask the local member if he would like to come... Yes, but there is a procedure that we should adopt, and that is the procedure. So you... do your job? Yeah, it's okay. I'm used to that, too. Yeah.
Thanks very much, Chair. You've covered, as well as the member, much of what I wanted to say, and the officer, I take on board what the officer's already said, but I printed it now anyway, won't take long. In terms of housing demand, future exaggerated population estimates, further pollution and traffic demands on the roads of Dinas Powys, this application, I believe, is unwanted, unnecessary, and further increases the unfair burden put upon our village residents by this council in its attempts to shore up its finances. However, the long and honourable fight to save the elegant house and former EMI facility was lost, and we must move on. If members decide in their wisdom to approve this application, I ask that instead of the proposed development being simply aimed or targeted at the over 50s, that the condition of only over 50s be applied. I appreciate there's something like $500,000 Section 106, but like has already been said, I didn't quite understand if it could be explained why on page 215 under the heading Education, no financial contribution to the community is required by the developer, when on page 213, final paragraph, under affordable housing, it is clearly stated, and I quote, the proposed development is for 100% open market housing. Seems to me obviously contradictory and an easy loophole for the developer to take full advantage of, to sell to anyone they can attract, thereby increasing their profits and neatly sidestepping a perfectly reasonable contribution to local education needs, and in particular to the immediate neighbours, which they will overlook, St Andrew's Major Primary School, who will undoubtedly be adversely affected, especially during the building period. I'm sure that the head teacher and her governors could use any extra financial help that they can find in the current economic climate.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. And now, in the normal tradition, the officer is invited to reply to what you've said.
Thank you, Chair. I think I've already covered the issue of the over 50s issue is covered separately by the covenant and the land sale. The only addition I would say to that is we've dealt with this issue on a number of other sites. I'm thinking of perhaps the Magistrates Court in Barry and other sites where it is controlled by other means that the occupancy is restricted in some way to avoid things like the education contributions, because there aren't going to be school-aged children there. And to do it through the planning system causes problems in terms of mortgage access for the developers, which is particularly why we're not proposing to put it in the Section 106 agreement, because we don't think it's necessary and it could cause problems in terms of the implementation of the scheme and undermine it. So I don't know if that clarifies the matter any further. But also on the point of will there be children there, because 50-year-olds can have school-aged children, and I don't dispute that at all. We've made an assessment, the Education Department have made an assessment based on this scheme, the nature of the proposals. There may well be a couple of school-aged children there, but we wouldn't normally ask for education contributions on the back of a couple of children, and the likelihood of there being significant numbers of children is so unlikely that it doesn't justify education contributions in our view, and that's why the Education Department haven't asked for it and we haven't asked for it through the system. So similarly, we don't ask for education contributions on sites of fewer than 10 dwellings for the same reason. The scale is not significant enough for it to warrant seeking Section 106 contributions. So that sort of explains our rationale and where we've come from as officers on that matter. To address the other issues, in terms of the off-site affordable housing contribution, it is unusual not to seek the affordable housing on-site. The particular reasons in this case is because of the nature of the development proposed, the on-site service charges that these residents are going to have to pay are significant to such an extent that they would warrant the future occupiers. It would be unaffordable for future occupiers to pay any of the ground rents and service charges that they would be forced to pay. So even if they could purchase it at an affordable rate, they wouldn't be able to afford to live there. Which is why our housing colleagues have said in this instance it is appropriate to take an off-site contribution to provide it elsewhere. At this stage, there is no site identified to spend that money. You would imagine the first priority would be to spend it within the Dinas Powys area. Members will be familiar with the protocol for Section 106 spend. Members will be consulted. Proposals will be put forward in due course when this money is received. So, you know, as local members, you would all be consulted on that spend. In terms of the detailed plans that you've requested and said that we should have the site access arrangements and the enclosure details now at this stage, I have to say it isn't uncommon for Planning Committee to be considering these types of development proposals without that level of detail. It is the norm that we condition those kind of details, and in due course when those details are submitted they would be obviously considered and assessed by officers and deemed whether or not they are acceptable. In the past, I'm aware that in some circumstances Planning Committee have asked for those details to come back to Planning Committee for discharge, but that wouldn't be the norm. It's you know, we do normally deal with these matters by conditions. So I think that was everything.
Okay, thank you. So Chris, you finished off, and yeah, I think Val had her arm up next. Thanks for that, Chris.
Yes, I've got a few concerns. I didn't quite get the sort of details of the traffic sort of calming, we'll put it that way, time being. But a couple of things concern me. The access is straight up and down, there's no doubt about that. But we're querying who the land belongs to the right.
East side.
It's east, I think it's the north side myself, but there we are, of the gateway. Is that Vale land as well? I would have thought it is. Because could that not be used as a point of access, you know, sort of would curve in slightly, I agree, and it would also mean moving the zebra crossing slightly, which I think would have to be moved anyway to the other side of the access for safety. But we're just querying the ownership of that land. I think it belongs to Bryn Eithin, but I can't swear to it.
You have to knock that's off.
It doesn't form part of the application site, so I can't comment on whether or not it is under the control or ownership of the council, whether it's adopted highway or whether it forms part of the land to be transferred to the applicants here. Obviously, we are satisfied that adequate and appropriate access can be provided to the site, within the site and within the adopted highway, that can be done, and that's why we've recommended imposing conditions.
And can I remind you, Val, that land ownership is nothing to be a consideration of this committee. Yeah. Do you want to put your microphone on? That's it.
When Stuart Egan mentioned this development to me, that I thought 50 was far too young, more like 60, but of course then you've got the 50 plus strategy. See, they all think 50 is old these days. And also, why 3-storey flat roofed parts on one side, on the right hand side? Why flat roofs is nothing to do with that area of the village or any part of the village really. To me, it doesn't. The others are pitched, aren't they, on the other side? I don't know why put flat roofed and why 3-storey anyway. 3-bedroomed.
Do you want to answer it?
Oh, yeah.
Do you want to knock off your microphone while the planning officer answers?
Yeah, it's not for me to just justify or explain why they've chosen to do it, but we have assessed it and we think it's acceptable. It's a modern contemporary design. There are other examples of flat roof contemporary buildings in Dinas Powys, not least of which in the heart of the village, but
You mean the ones that won the National Building Design Awards? Yeah.
We're quite happy that the contemporary design of the proposal is acceptable, and particularly in that context, which is actually quite open in terms of surrounding built form, that you can actually do something a bit unique, and we're happy with it. Your microphone, sorry.
Put your microphone on again, please. Yeah.
I'm not, I hate speaking. The contribution of 36,000 towards sustainable transport facilities to be used on one or more of the following pedestrian routes between the site and the village, etc. What I would like some of that money going to is to restore a bus service that we've had for many years and is now finished in the last few months, to Culver House. Very popular with the residents, particularly the elderly. It went twice weekly. We needn't have it twice weekly. But I wondered whether that could be extended to something like that. Because the bus owners struggled for a long time to keep that going, eventually had to give it up a couple of months ago.
Do you want to answer
it stopped
that?
right outside as well.
Do you want to knock your microphone up while she answers the question? Yeah.
You'll notice this more and more in planning committee reports now, that we are being a little bit more specific about where the money can be used. This is all to do with the SIL regulation, pooling restrictions, and trying to make sure that we deal with that appropriately. But you've mentioned the first couple of things in terms of the pedestrian routes to the site and the village and so on. But if you carried on, it also lists bus service provision serving the development. So that would obviously include what you've just described. Again, I refer to the member protocol for spending Section 106 money, and you would be entitled to comment on that then.
So a huge amount of money, I think. I mean, we benefited from the Westra Cross thing, which helped with the development of our play area. But it's a big area towards public open space, which is always nice, but it doesn't have to, the common is big enough, as you know. Perhaps that could be used to enhance other green areas in the village, can it?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it needs to be connected to development, so it needs to be likely to be used by the future occupiers of this development. So we'll need to make sure that there's careful consideration in terms of that. Yeah, it depends on how far people are prepared to walk to access facilities, but obviously you would also expect the open space enhancements to be targeted towards the over 50s.
I feel we've got to support the planning committee of Dinas Powys Community Council, and I'm also going to vote against it. I'm sorry to say so.
Oh, right. I'm waiting for the time when we ever get a planning committee consent from Dinas Powys Community Council, but there you go. John Drysdale.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I just wanted to say that I support the application fully. I mean, I think the principle of residential development on this site is established. It's simply a case of what form it's going to be there. It seems to be a reasonable design. There are certainly concerns about the construction phase rather than traffic and so on when it's in operation. But I think the beefed up conditions cover those points, and I think it's a very welcome development in the Vale, and we should support it. But I also wanted to respond to a couple of points that Councillor Williams raised. In terms of Section 106, well, I'm all for it, for developers to share the benefit of profit they make on land and building with the community. However, we are restricted to Section 106 being used in order to mitigate adverse effects of the development. And in terms of education, I think it would be very, very difficult to argue that there were adverse effects such that we could justify Section 106 allocation on education. And then the last is just a comment on the inflated figures for housing development in the Vale. I would just draw attention to the recent assessment for need for affordable housing, and if you tot it up, it's only over 5 years, the figures, but if you tot it up over 15 years, the period of the LDP, it comes to about 8,400 houses simply for the affordable housing need. So a target of 9,500 and a buffer up to 10,500 doesn't look overinflated to me. It leaves quite small headroom actually for private development. But that's just a comment aside.
Thank you for that. I did see Councillor Clive Williams' hand up next, and then I'll come to Bob Penrose.
In saying I support this, I'm also very saddened because I spent time on a weekly basis and 5 Christmases there.
Yes.
And the spirit that was there.
When did they release you, Clive?
Well, I would have gone this year if it hadn't been put out. But I'm not against this. But you brought up a very, very important thing there. And Chris brought it up as well. I would have thought that the architect, when he's designed that there, would have had some sort of brief that he's looking for elderly accommodation. That's my gut feeling there. Now, Chris brought up the thing of being 50. Now, it's quite often, it's not a planning thing, it's a legal covenant there, but if you said that it was 65, which is that's like the retirement age, that's going to certainly help the traffic flow, because I would have imagined someone 50 might still be working, etc., etc., where if it was more elderly, hopefully there wouldn't be so much traffic, Mr. Chairman. So, you know, I think that it's not a planning issue, but while it's now being built and while all the legal things are going on, we could ask that the legal actually state that it's 65. I think I'm right in saying that.
The legal officer will reply
yes,
to that.
Yes, that's right.
I think that what we
sorry.
What we need to do is to see on what basis the land has been sold in the first place. I'm not entirely sure what the covenant. Yeah, so the covenant in there at the moment specifies 50 over, so there's not really a great deal we can do now to do that. It's just part of the land sale, so.
Yeah. Yes.
I'm trying to be helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. Once it's signed off, you can't go back to him and say, "Oh, we're going to alter that document now." It's signed off and the land's sold.
Could I ask, does it actually state 50, the age?
Plan
No, I'm afraid I haven't seen the document, but I could certainly check that. But I presume it would say 50. Yeah, I can check that for you.
Okay, Councillor Bob Penrose.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, my point was going to be very much on the theme of Councillor Williams's, because I sort of look at the first lines and it says it's construction of a small retirement complex, and then we throw in 50, and I think Councillor Williams' point is right, that I mean, if we did a straw poll around this committee, I think we probably, one or two of us, would exceed 50, and I can't really see many around the table who have stopped working. So that sort of shoots down the retirement. I also find it strange to have a retirement complex of 2 and 3 stories. You know, the older you get, the more you hate stairs, which seems very, very strange to me. And the question, anyway, to bring relevance to it, is what is the policy? Is there any conditions on buy-to-let? Because, you know, anybody who's 50 could buy one and then let. So the conditions on stipulated on that it can only be let to people over 50 and residency. So, you know, it's a relevant point. I think we should look into at the time.
Councillor Andrew Parker.
Thank you, Fred. Just a quick one on the highway. On the plan, which I presume is the little plan that came in, the red line includes the front area, which is the local authorities, which also includes there. Whereas on that one, it only goes as far as the gate. I'm only doing it to point out the discrepancy. The only other thing I would say is, having read it, there are only 6 parking spaces on a 5-metre road. If somebody has a 60th birthday party and you've got 30, 40, 50 people coming there, and of course you've got this facility where everybody can mingle and meet, I think the car parking requirement is far too low and will result in parking problems at a later date. So it's a cautionary thing to maybe include when you go into the details.
Do you want to respond to that, Victoria?
Yeah, only to say that obviously there are appropriate conditions dealing with parking and access layout. However, obviously we can't cater residential layouts for one-off parties where you might have 40 or 50 visitors. It's the same with any housing scheme. You know, we have an appropriate level of visitor spaces, and we think the level of parking that can be provided here is sufficient for this type of use.
Okay, I think we've given it a good airing. Shall we go to a vote because Councillor Chris Franks wants to refuse it?
Chairman, I'd be grateful for that, but before, it has been suggested that there are opportunities for the detailed traffic management plan and the highway arrangements to actually come to committee in the event of this being approved tonight. In that unfortunate event, is it possible for this committee to have that opportunity?
It's not normal. No. I don't know why we would want to do that. It's normally a condition, and it goes to the Highways Department, and the Highways officers deal with it, and the Planning Department. That's normal, isn't it?
That is the norm. I'm not saying it can't be done. It's
No.
for members to decide whether that's
I don't. I'd like to hear the views of other members if they want to see the what you're saying is we don't trust your highways officers, and
No, Chair, I got the highest respect for them, but it is of such importance in this instance, and there's not many sites where 200 children cross the entrance twice a day. So I think it would give residents and parents far more reassurance if there was more of a public agreement was made in public rather than just by officers.
I think I did mention on site this morning my reservations about what you're proposing, because before we had a home with 30 patients in there, older people, with all their families visiting, with all the nursing staff, the doctors visiting, the services to supply that building. And when you count that up with the 18 proposed, the traffic movements on that junction are far less, and you didn't have those stringent conditions that you're trying to apply to this. So my view would be that this is less dangerous than what was there before. But I'll hear what Councillor John Drysdale's got to say, then I'll come back to you.
You asked for a view on it, Chair. I think my view would be that it would be highly appropriate for local ward members to discuss with officers as the details come forward, and perhaps to convey that to local residents and discuss it with them. But I think I'd be a bit uncomfortable if we started down the road of the committee actually considering the details of, detailed technical arrangements. I think that's not a way we want to go.
No. Okay. So, anything anybody else wants to add? Did you want to come back at all, Chris?
I won't try the patience of the committee for much longer, but I note that you are an authority on this site, but so is the head teacher of the school.
Yes.
And the head teacher and the chair of governors, I'm sorry to say, don't agree with you.
No.
And they were well aware of the previous situation.
Yeah.
And they are still very anxious about the situation. Now, if members don't feel inclined that it should come back, as a fallback, I would grasp Councillor Drysdale's kind suggestion. But I hope members do appreciate there is a great deal of concern about this site.
Yeah.
Which hopefully we can address.
Okay. Right, I think we'll put it to a vote. Chris, sorry? Yeah, well, you did have a second, didn't you? Val moved. Val was second in it, yeah. So it's... no, yeah, I think Chris is going to move refusal, but I think the legal officer wants to clarify with you the reasons why you want to refuse it.
it's not so much the reasons for refusal. I just want to point out that obviously any reason, if you know, if you are looking to go against officers' recommendations, they need to be up for robust reasons for refusal. So it's just to point out to members that that's the case, really, just to make sure that there are robust reasons there.
Okay, now I'm just going to vote. Yeah, we'll do what I suggested. Chris is moving refusal. Those in favour of refusing the officer's recommendation, please show. That's 4. Okay. Those against Chris's proposal of refusal, please show. Okay. I think Audrey Preston is abstaining. Yes, I thought you might be. Okay, got the numbers? So if I put the substantive motion for members' officers' recommendation as set out in the agenda, those who wish to vote in favour of those, please show. Nine, 4. And those against again?
With the amendments and late reps.
Yes, with amendments and late reps. That's. Are you voting this time, Bob? Yeah, okay. And Audrey, are you abstaining? Yes, okay. Thank you. Right, thank you. That's the... You want to leave now, do you, Val? Ah, right, yes. We did notice. And there was complaints from those on the site for opening it again. Okay, shall we go back to the planning agenda? We're on page 34, which is Church Farm, Cowbridge Road, Ostradowen. And this is a stance report. And many of us know what a stance report is. And I'm going to ask Victoria to lead us through that report. Oh, Justina's going to do it. Sorry. Yes. Okay. Without Justina speaking, are members happy with reading the report? They're happy with the officers?
Yes. Yeah, I'm very...
All in favour?
Yeah.
Any against? No, that's clearly carried. Thank you. There's... thank you for that. You have saved a bit of time. So the next one is land south of the A48, west of Old Rectory Drive, St Nicholas. That's on page 82. Another stance report. Is anybody...
I'm happy to do the same as Andrew. I mean, just glad to see it. You know, we were going to recommend refusal. I just hope the officer sees sense and looks at all the evidence there, because it is totally the wrong thing in the wrong place.
Right, okay. Second. Members happy with the officer's recommendation and the stance report? Yes? Any against? No, that's clearly carried. Thank you for that. So over to page 122. Tin Ye Trench Farm. Is that right, Councillor Bird? Tinny Trench. Okay, Tinny Trench, which is the Forest Reservoir at Ostradowen. Does that sound a bit better? Right, okay then. Shall we ask Victoria to lead us through that one?
Thank you, Chair. This is an application for a bond conversion to a holiday chalet. The application originally came in as a private change of use to just a normal residential unit. Officers negotiated to change it to a holiday chalet because it's not considered to be a sustainable location for a separate residential dwelling, but our policies that are favourable towards tourism support the use of barns and for farm diversification. For barns to be used for tourist accommodation, so it changes the emphasis towards favourable consideration. It's largely using the existing building, some alterations as set out in the report, but officers are supported that it complies with our policies and our rural buildings SPG.
Lovely. Any member? Councillor Andrew Parker had his hand up first, and then I'll take Councillor Jonathan Bird.
Yes, I'd move officer's recommendation. Particularly glad to see conditions 3 and 4. I won't read them out other than to say that it does preclude backdoor people moving in, and that's a very sensible clause. So I would move officer's recommendation.
Bob Penrose seconded it, by the way. Yeah, sorry, you're a bit slow. Councillor Bird.
I've just read those two clauses and I don't need to speak.
Oh, well done, thank you. Any other member? Shall we go straight to a vote then? Okay, those in favour of the officer's recommendation? That is clearly carried. Thank you for that. Right. We're back to Bassett Road, Sully, which was a site visit, and I think there's some late reps on that as well. So we're on page 142, Bassett Road, Sully, which was subject to a good site visit this morning. But so, Victoria, could you lead us through it?
Thank you, Chair. Just to point out that there is a late representation on this, which is a letter from the applicant with an amended site layout plan, which simply deletes the garage for shown to serve plot 2. Just refer members to that.
Is there anything going on the screen?
Yeah, sorry, we're having technical difficulties with the projection. The plans are obviously in the report, so I think if members can refer to the plans in the report, that should be good enough. If anyone wants to have a look at the plans on the screen, we can bring it round to you if you can't see them in the report clearly, but I think hopefully we can struggle through while...
Okay. If you can deliver the report then.
Yep. Okay, so this is an application, as you alluded to, we went on site this morning to have a look at it. The site has quite an extensive planning history, which is set out in the report, but needless to say, the principle of residential development on this site has already been accepted, first with an appeal inspector allowing an application for dwellings on the site. So we're now considering this proposal, which is a new and unique proposal for 2 detached dwellings, quite contemporary dwellings, both individual, both designed specifically to respond to the restrictions on the site, which again we saw today. The site is quite constrained, both in terms of its shape and in terms of the levels and the relationship with nearby houses. It's completely surrounded by other houses which overlook the site, and therefore very careful consideration has had to be placed throughout the design and in negotiations with officers to ensure that overlooking and overbearing issues are addressed, to ensure that the development's not an neighbourly form of development. Officers are satisfied that the scheme does comply with all our policies in respect of amenity space and neighbour impact, and therefore recommending approval.
Lovely. I know a local member has indicated he wishes to speak. If he comes and takes his chair, we'll put the spotlights on him and we'll time him. Over to you.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity to put forward the many concerns, understandable concerns of local residents to these plans. For those of you who attended the site meeting today and those looking at their papers there, you'll observe that this is a parcel of land enclosed by the estate that was built some 35 or so years ago. Well, there's a reason why that was enclosed, because that was, again, one of the many broken promises of developers that this was to be designated public open space, along with a community hall, the shops and the pharmacy that never arrived either. So you'll understand why residents are very dubious about the assurances of any developers, quite frankly. If you turn to page 145, 146 here, we'll see the potted history of previous applications here. I'll tell you what I'm reading. I'm reading refused, refused, overbearing, appeal withdrawn, refused, 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 refused. And in fact, the 1 or 2 applications that have been approved for, including the latest one before this application, are all for 1 dwelling. Every other application has been refused or turned down on appeal. I will turn to the comments of the planning inspector of the appeal at 2008, which was dismissed, actually pointing out that not only will the new dwellings be overlooked, the surrounding existing dwellings be overlooked, but of course the new dwellings will, and that's fairly obvious to anybody who attended the site meeting today. What a situation where we're considering that both dwellings would actually be overlooked by each other. Now, as I've said, this isn't a straightforward application. Anybody who's ever visited the area will see that the adjoining buildings, or certainly the buildings south of this plot, are bungalows. And yet here we have applications for two-level dwellings. It was explained today that actually the developer will be burrowing into the side of the slope, and that the eaves of these houses will be no higher than the surrounding fences, which quite frankly I would dispute. But what is apparent when you have a look at these plans, that there are actually windows above the eaves of these buildings. So what reassurance is that for overlooking? There is none, of course. We have concerns about flooding. Anybody who knows Surrey will know the whole length of the village is prone to flooding from the Cog Road above, both this side and the other end of the village. This is well documented. If we build on here, of course, we're concreting over more of a soakaway. It has to have an effect on the houses below, who have already had flooding problems from this. The area and surrounding houses, or certainly the houses below, of course, are bungalows. They will be overlooked. That's my 3 minutes, is it?
10 seconds if you want to just wind
I would
up.
also say, on a personal note also, apart from the overbearing nature, which has been pointed out here, we see timber cladding in a totally brick-built area. We only have to look down here, or the Cogan Spur, to see, at the waterfront, timber cladding. Within 15 months of any building, it's grey, cracked, rotting wood in every instance I ever witness. Why would you have something so out of character? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I think the planning officer now has a right to reply to Councillor Marnie's speech. So I'll lead you in, Victoria.
Thank you. Just a couple of points to respond. I just wanted to clarify that it's not quite correct to say that the previous approvals have only been for one dwelling. If I refer you back to page 145 and over onto 146, the application 2009-696 for the erection of 2 semi-detached dormer bungalows with associated parking was refused, but it was subsequently allowed at appeal, and that's why, so the principle of having 2 dwellings, albeit semi-detached, has previously been accepted. So I just wanted to clarify that point. The only other points I wanted to really pick up on, in terms of the issue of overlooking, that has been carefully considered by officers. The windows referred to at high level will be obscurely glazed, and there are conditions dealing with that. So officers do feel that any potential issues of overlooking have been dealt with and have been fully considered. And also in respect of the flooding issue, obviously the relevant parties have been consulted and no objection to flooding has been raised. So officers are content that all of those issues have been already dealt with.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay. Councillor Bob Penrose.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and save the committee's patience by not overlapping Councillor Marnie's, because most of the points he makes I share. The only thing I would say is, as been pointed out by the officer, yes, planning permission was given on appeal for 2 semi-detached houses. Then there was an application for a single bungalow. Now, I think I expressed the views of the residents in as much that were the application for 2 bungalows, I don't think there would be any serious objection. But the points brought up by Councillor Marnie on being overlooked both ways are very, very relevant, because, as he's rightly said, the dormer windows are higher, they are up in the roof, so they will overlook and they will be overlooked. I'm also conscious of the fact that last time we refused, the application was turned over by Welsh Government, but I don't think we should capitulate on that. And based on that, you know, I will obviously be voting against officers' recommendations. However, if the committee are of a mind, there are a couple of the conditions, if I may, Chair, just reiterate on. The first one is with regard to the plans for the houses. On house 1, it shows the rear dormers are depicted as opening windows, and yet in condition 9, it states that the windows are not to be opening. I'd like to confirm that the windows are going to be obscure glass, which, personally speaking, I find very strange in bedroom areas to have obscure glass because and unopenable windows. But if that would be the condition, perhaps that could be confirmed. I have concerns for the properties alongside, on the right-hand side, as you enter the site, which are behind property 1, because the wall, because of the gradient of the actual site, the properties are very low, and it does require screening, probably to an amount which I would think would be landscape hedging perhaps, but to probably 2.5, nearly 3 metres, because otherwise this two-way vision is going to be from both gardens, which I don't think is acceptable. If permission were granted, I would request that construction had scaffold screening, because when they were being built, the existing properties would be very much overlooked. And also like to put conditions on work times from Monday to Friday 8 to 5, the usuals, and Saturday morning 8 to 1 o'clock, because it is such an intense area of residence. I think they've got to have some respite from any building and construction. The one other thing which I am concerned about is property 2 being obviously split in design. You'll notice there's 2 staircases, and both sides of the houses mimic one another, they mirror one another exactly, and there is strong suspicion of residents that this will suddenly become 2 semi-detached properties. Really speaking, most of the other points have been covered by Councillor Marnie. As I say, I will be voting against officers' recommendations, but if the vote goes against, I'd like the conditions altered, please.
Yeah, I think the split staircase was explained to us on site, wasn't it? About why there was 2 staircases, but there are other members in here who never heard that explanation, but I understood that that was the design of the building. But
could I just add one point, Chair? Then that was that the actual applicant did point out that there are 2 sisters that are moving into that house, and so they're going to be divided, I assume. So I think there is motive for that design, which concerns me that it will act as 2 separate properties.
Right, I didn't hear that, but okay, Victoria, can you come back on some of the points?
I'll come back firstly on that point as we're talking about it. Obviously on site it was described that the nature of the house is quite narrow, and that was explained as being the reason for the 2 staircases. It's obvious, you know, it's a matter of personal preference whether you have 1 staircase or 2 staircases. Fundamentally, we are considering an application of that house on its own as a house. If it was subdivided, it would require planning permission, and we would have to consider the merits of that at that time. What you described in terms of the personal circumstances where the future occupiers may be 2 sisters living together, well, that normally could quite conceivably still be 1 household that wouldn't require consent. It depends very much on the nature and use of the building and how close the sisters are in terms of sharing meals and sharing lives and various things like that. But essentially you would expect it still to be one residential unit, and if it became something different it would require planning permission that we could then control at that time. Nevertheless, you know, we don't see that the existence of 2 staircases is any reason to be resisting planning permission in this case. On the other issues that you raised, in terms of landscaping, there is a landscaping condition, particularly to do with planting, and we would need to ensure that appropriate planting and screening was provided at the boundaries. I've already discussed the issue of overlooking and the windows being exteriorly glazed, and as you say, non-opening, and there is that condition 9 to cover that off, so that would be controlled if members are minded to approve. In terms of the hours of operation of construction, officers are of the view that it is not appropriate to put planning conditions on to restrict the construction operation hours. That's covered by separate legislation, and it's not easily enforceable, so it begs the question, why do it in a planning report? What we tend to do now, as a matter of course, if there is a concern that a site like this is surrounded by residential properties where you could have that harm, we would recommend perhaps putting an informative on to suggest those are the normal hours of construction, and then environmental health obviously have powers, and noise nuisance and so on if those sort of hours of operation are restricted. So if members are minded towards a recommendation for approval, we could always suggest an additional informative to deal with that.
Okay, right, Councillor Jonathan Bird, first.
Thank you, Chair. Just quickly, Bob mentioned scaffold screening. I think it's a very good idea. I've recently come across some problems locally where it was a previous site visit we've had actually, where the builders are causing an issue of overlooking. So I would encourage the planners to bear that in mind on any tricky sites, that perhaps during the build process that scaffolding is screened to stop peering in to local properties. I don't know if that's achievable or not, Vicky, is it?
I would suggest that we perhaps put a CEMP condition on, construction environmental management plan condition, which we've done on we generally tend to do them on much larger developments, but given the constrained nature of this site and the number of residential properties, it wouldn't be completely out of the question to do that, and that could cover off those kind of issues.
So subject to that management plan. Okay. Jeff.
Chairman, I understand the concerns that local members have about this site, and I recall several occasions when the planning committee have been up visiting this site, and I sympathise with the point made by local members about the expectation that this site perhaps would be at least an open amenity area, but of course that we are where we are in relation to that. So we've got a piece of land, it's owned by somebody, they wish to develop on this site, and I think on the basis of that and the previous decision and appeals, I think the officers have done a pretty good job of trying to cover all the bases in their report. They've got 16 conditions. So I think all the points that have been raised by the local members to greater or lesser extent have been covered by the conditions, including the one about land drainage. So I think whilst local members and residents around this site may not be happy to see development happen, I think as a planning committee we've got to consider the application that is before us, not what people would like to see. And on that basis, Chairman, I'd like to move the officer's recommendations.
Thank you. Councillor Parker. Yes, okay.
Yeah, I'm just looking at two conditions to really assist. Number 9, quite clearly, if all the windows can't open, there will be some fairly sophisticated ventilation details required, which can be quite intrusive into the elevation. So I think on 9 we should also include details of ventilation if that's practical. On 10, looking at the plan on for plot 2, there are 2 substantial voids at first floor, and it took me a while to work out whether they could be used as bedrooms, and quite clearly they could, should they be moved over. Do we have any powers under this decision to actually ensure that they're not quickly converted to additional bedrooms, thereby making a 4-bedroom house as opposed to a 2-bedroom house? And finally, there is they've got these screens, and again, these screens need to be carefully considered because they could suddenly produce some overlooking if that course of action of covering over the voids was a practical proposition.
Victoria?
The internal arrangement of the house, obviously it needs to be built as per the approval, but then there are various permitted development and other rights that you can do internally to a dwelling, just like when anyone builds a house and they have big bedrooms in it and they can subdivide it into 1 or more bedrooms, and it's not really the place, the planning system, to restrict that. It's something that you are able to do. Having said that, I'm not convinced that that would cause a problem in this instance in any event, because this site, as we saw today, is actually a very large site. To have 2 dwellings on it is a restricted and constrained site, as we've talked about all the houses around it. But in terms of the density of what's being proposed, it's actually very low density compared to what we normally see on modern housing estates. So in terms of these properties, if they internally change to increase the number of bedrooms, I don't see that that would cause us a problem in planning terms. So it wouldn't be something that we would be seeking to restrict in any event.
Okay. I've got a proposal on the table. I think that Bob Penrose moved refusal, didn't you? No. Okay then. Okay then, thank you. So it's been moved and seconded that...
Sorry, Chair, can I just clarify? I have suggested the addition of an informative for the hours of operation of construction and a construction environmental management plan conditions.
Yeah,
I
did say to it will be subject to a management plan.
Yeah, lovely, thanks.
Yeah. So that's what we're voting on. The officer's recommendation subject to a management plan being agreed between the planning department and the developer. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Those in favour of officer's recommendation, please show. $11. Those against? 2. And I think 1 abstention. Oh, you voted for it, did you? Thank you, Nick. Right. Did you count him in? Yeah, lovely, thank you. Moving swiftly on then. We're back to... right, Home Farm Land, Wester Drope Road, St George's, Super Ely, which is on page 172. And I think we've had some late reps, and Glamorgan Gwent Archaeology are asking us to do something.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'll go straight to the late reps on this one because the comments from Glamorgan Gwent Archaeological Trust are recommending that we defer this decision because they're worried about the protection of the archaeological resource, and I would recommend that members do defer the application at this stage so that we can resolve that matter.
Thank you. Councillor Bird.
Thank you. Yeah, it's on that matter. I'd like to make a little comment. This has been in for quite some time, this application, and Glamorgan and Gwent Archaeological Trust have had an awful long time to comment and come back on it. And to come back at this late stage, I feel is a little bit naughty on their behalf. I know we don't have any call over them, but is there anything we can do about this? Because you know, they are one of the more awkward consultees, and I just feel that sometimes they do stifle applications by leaving their consultation
to the very last.
Until the very last minute. And I would suggest, I've got no problem with deferral, but I would suggest that we write back to them commenting
that
about
it was
lateness,
very late,
yes.
and that you've had this on your desk for some time. Is that possible, Victoria?
Yeah, by all means, I can send them an email to that effect.
Okay, subject to Victoria writing a suitable letter. Happy to defer? Yeah? Okay, thank you for that. Defer we will. So we've done Bryn Hythen, so we've got the next one, which I've declared an interest on, page 227, Court Farm, Bombleston. Okay. And I think a few of us are moving. Yeah, you physically got to come round here, John.
I better... No, because it's of the names. All right, if I can let people go out of the room, Jonathan, and then... Yeah. Well, before I bring the officer in, I understand the local member has a proposal.
Yeah, I just wanted to... you've all seen the late reps, and the agent has asked for a site visit. I've had some comments, queries, doubts about the scheme, and I would like to see a site visit as well. I think we could all gain from going up there and having a look. So, as a local member, I'm requesting we do have a site visit.
Committee agreed, have a site visit. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thanks for that. So, we've moved on from there. We've got two more items on page 246 and 263, which is the Keeper's Cottage, Lower Porthcurry, Porthcurry Road, Roos, and I understand those two have been withdrawn. Okay, so those are withdrawn. And then we move on to the last item on the agenda, which is on page 273, subject to late reps, which is 85 Lavernock Road, Penarth, which was subject to a site visit today. I have to have the officers speak about it first, Clive, and then you'll be the first person I'll come to.
Yeah, fine. I'm trying to say Victoria. That was.
Oh, right. Oh, you're moving. Okay, then. Fine. If members are happy to do that, move
I think
it.
it was just a move, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was to actually move
Officers' recommendation.
Plus, Mr. Chairman, I wish to thank Victoria and her staff here, because this is a very complex site, and this is a very, very full report, and it's been subject to 2 or 3 inspections there, so I think we're covered again. Thank you, Victoria.
Okay. Yeah, have you got a seconder, Clive?
Sorry?
Oh, we've got 5 there. We'll take Councillor Bird, shall we?
There you go.
Yeah, please.
I'm off to my community council. Christmas
Right,
party.
okay then. Members in favour of the officer's recommendation, please show. There you are, that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Can I wish you all a happy Christmas and a very happy New Year? And we'll meet all up in January. Ho, 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 ho. Thank you.